here.
Can you make it a full
Myself,
screen? Make it a slideshow so that everyone can see easily.
sure.
Okay.
Sir, there is a lots of disturbances in the background. Can you please
I'm muted,
request everybody?
Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, a very good evening to one and all present over here. Myself, Darshita Kalyani, and I'm pursuing my PhD from JIRA University, Ahmedabad, India. And I have just submitted my thesis as a part of my PhD. And I am attending this conference for PhD only. So what my area of interest is computer science, and I'm working on the software engineering domain and on Scrum. So the title of my research is a comprehensive study of Agile project management with Scrum and JIRATOOL of Scrum framework. This is my presentation bird's eye view. These are the basic topics that I'm going to cover for today's presentation. And I'm going to start with the concept of project management. Basically, what the project management is, IT industry receives many projects, many services. So the same project, the same services needs to be managed very well. So project management is a methodology to manage the projects. So basically what happens in the Scrum is the requirements from the clients gets divided among various user stories, various end user stories. And the project management is a concept to manage these end user stories effectively. Which user story would be given first priority, which would be given the second priority, and how the user stories are getting implemented in various iterations and like that. So basically project management can be implemented through traditional waterfall or agile. Since the project management is a concept in IT industry and in any sector, the concept of project management can be implemented through the traditional waterfall model or agile. What happens in the traditional waterfall model is that it is a sequential approach. So once the particular phase of the project gets started and it is freezed, one cannot go back for the same. So suppose if the planning is done, from the planning the team goes for the designing, from the designing the team goes for the coding, and from the coding the team goes for the testing. Right now, if the particular at any moment of time, if the team as a testing stage, they cannot go back to the coding stage. So if any kind of change comes after viewing the product, the changes cannot be accommodated. So basically the waterfall model is not suited, not appropriate for the industry in which the changes are occurring very frequently. And if we do focus on the agile project management methodology, as the figure 1 suggests, it works on the concepts of the iterations. Customer requirements are implemented through various iterations. See, in agile project management methodology, customer does not give all the requirements in one shot. They give requirements in various chunks, partitions. Say for the first iteration, the customer has given a few requirements, just like a 3 or 4 requirements. These requirements will be implemented, and the demonstration will be given to the customers. And if the customers are very happy with the demonstration, the team can continue with the next iterations. And if the customer suggest any changes, the same changes will be implemented through the coming iterations. This is the concept, basic concepts of agile. So at the end of every iteration, customer gives the feedback, and according to the feedback, the project team makes the changes into the product. This is the diagram of the agile project management methodology. See this, first what happens is that a plan of the user requirements are done. Once the planning is done, the next step is design, then coding, develop, test. Once the testing is done from the software side, software team, the product will be given to the customers. Customers will be giving the feedback, and the demonstration will be released once again. Now, concept of Scrum framework. See, Scrum is an agile project management methodology. Basically, what happens is that project management can be implemented through agile and waterfall. Agile can be implemented through various frameworks, and Scrum is one of the frameworks of agile. And in Scrum, we have two basic concepts: story concept and sprint concept. What is story is that the requirements of the client, the requirements of the stakeholders are divided, are transformed into various end user stories. Just like if the client says that details of the employee should be managed. So what product owner does, what project manager does, These requirements will be transformed into various user stories like add employee, delete employee, manage employee, and so on. And this end user stories will be implemented into the sprints. And sprints are basically the iterations. The most common duration of the sprint is of 2 weeks. So at the end of 15 days, at the end of each 15 days, a workable, shippable product is released to the customers. So this is the flow of stories, the flow of user stories into the Scrum. First of all, when customer gives any requirement, when stakeholder rather gives any requirement, the requirements are converted into user stories, and the user stories will be entered into the product backlog. The user stories entered at the product backlog stage are unrefined. This means they are not detailed, a raw user stories. And at the backlog refinement stage, the user stories will be detailed. Detailing of the user stories will be done, and at this stage the priorities of the user stories will be set. All the user stories cannot be implemented in 15 days in a particular sprint. So team, the Scrum squad, product owner needs to set the priorities for the stories. These stories should be implemented first in the upcoming sprint, and according to the priority set at the backlog refinement stage, the Scrum team pulls the story from backlog refinement to the sprint backlog. So what is contained in the sprint backlog is the user stories which are going to implemented in the coming sprint. And from the sprint backlog, the user stories will be actually implemented in sprint. And at the end of each and every sprint, the product is released to the customers. So that is the releasable product. This is the existing Scrum framework. Just what I have spoken is this is the graphical representation of the same. If we see at the Scrum steps, we have a product backlog, we have a backlog refinement. At the product backlog, a list of unrefined story, and product owner is responsible for managing the product backlog. And product owner is also responsible for managing the change. When any change comes at the end of the sprint, again the product owner creates the stories of the change, and the change story would be entered into the product backlog once again, and the same steps will be carried over the stories. And then we have a backlog refinement. As I have already mentioned, the stories become actionable and ready to implement in sprints only after the backlog refinement. At this stage, every squad member should be ready with the stories. Sprint backlog is that the requirements are pulled into sprint backlog according to the highest priority during sprint planning meeting. As I have already mentioned, all the requirements contained in the all the requirement mentioned in the backlog refinement cannot be implemented in each and every sprint. So the requirements will be implemented, the user stories will be implemented according to the priorities which are set at the sprint planning meeting. And at the end of every sprint, a releasable feature, or we can say a shippable product, is released. Customer reviews it and gives the feedback to them. This is the role played in Scrum. The Scrum team, the Scrum framework is composed of 3 different roles: a product owner, Scrum master, and cross-functional team. A product owner is the person who has an overall vision of the product. He is responsible for managing the changes in the Scrum. A Scrum master is responsible for smooth working of each and every sprint, and a cross-functional team is made up of the professional who is actually developing the product. They do take care of the analysis of the requirements, coding of the requirements, and the quality assurance of the requirements. And Scrum, again the Scrum framework, we can implement the Scrum framework through various tools, and JIRA is one of the tools of the Scrum framework. And JIRA is offered by Internatioanl company. So in JIRA, the sprints of the Scrum framework can be managed. In JIRATOOL, the concept of Scrum, like product backlog, backlog refinement, sprint backlog, sprint, are ready-made available. Only the product owner needs to enter the stories to the interface of the JIRA. And in JIRA, an organization may have various projects. A particular project, a particular service is going to be identified through the key in JIRA. Through the JIRA, the Scrum squad can get an idea okay, how many sprints have been implemented for a particular product, how many more sprints are going to go, which features have been released for each sprint, and so on. If we look at the dashboard of this JIRA, here we can see a few columns are there in which a product backlog stories are there. A product backlog in JIRA may be divided among unrefined and refined story. Unrefined understands product backlog and refined understands backlog refinement. So we can see that the orange colored square box represents the unrefined stories created by the product owner and entered into the product backlog component in JIRATOOL. From the product backlog component in JIRA, the stories are refined at the backlog refinement stage, and the same is available in the JIRA. And the sprint backlog contains the list of the stories which are going to be implemented in the next sprint. Now, with next sprint, suppose if 5 stories have been pulled, the tracking of the stories can be done through the JIRA. A tracking understands which stories are still to implement, which user stories are currently in progress, and which user stories have already been done, like to do, in progress, and done. So if we look at the conclusion, the concept of agile fits very well in the sectors where requirements are changing very frequently. If we look at the today's era, the requirements, the changes are inevitable in any product development. No product development would be that in which the no changes will come by the stakeholder or customers. So the Scrum Agile fits very well to this concept, and JIRA is one of the popular tool to implement the concept of the Scrum framework. And these are the list of the references which I have referred. Thank you very much.